Hi, welcome to the Painting with Commentary for the Nolzur's Marvelous Miniatures Adult Remorhaz from episode 48 of Paint to Life. If you missed that episode, you can check it out in the link below in the description. And this is admittedly a long one, but I have lots of interesting things to talk about, so bear with me. Here's the material roll call, as suggested by a viewer. These are all the paints and mediums that I used. You can pause the video here to take a look at that. So the first thing I wanted to do with this Remorhaz was break him off the rock that he came with. I do this for some Nolzur's models. He was very simple to do, just get something flat like a screwdriver, wedge it underneath, and he pops right off of there. Just be gentle. So we're going to be using an XPS foam base for this. I wanted to have, when I broke the Remorhaz off, I realized, geez, the rock, it's a burrowing creature. It would be exciting if he was kind of coming out of a burrow instead of being standing up atop a rock. So what better material to use than XPS foam? So you're using my XPS foam cutter. I recommend the plug-in ones rather than the battery operated ones. And I don't have a table, but with a straight, hard, flat metal ruler, you can get nice straight lines out of it to cut yourself a square piece. I've glued two thicknesses together to make a cube, or not a cube, but the shape I needed. You could go deeper if you wanted, or buy a thicker piece, but I find that buying the half-inch or inch thick pieces, however big they are, is enough. So here he is, broken off of his rock on the little square that I've cut out, a disc for scale, and that's what I'm going to work with. So the next thing I want to do is kind of just mark out on this foam where he's going to stand, or what his dimensions are. Interestingly enough, when you look at the profile of a Remorhaz, he has a frill, and then he has all those legs, and he has his core body. One of my users on Instagram, when I asked them what they thought this was bursting out of the ice, he guessed Remorhaz, and he was right. Because, as this thing burrows, its frill has to come through, its legs have to come through, so you can see there, I've kind of drawn out the profile that I want to use for this immersion or emulsion hole. Now I'm using my foam cutter with one of the other attachments. It is the Thumpy Chubby, I guess. I don't know what you want to call it. I'm being very cautious to not burn through to the other side. I want to make sure it stays in one piece. But I'm using this, and I know it's not a great angle, but I don't usually film this sort of thing anyway, so I thought some of you might want to see it with my big chunky hand there. Yeah, chunky hand. So, there you go. So I got the bigger parts, pull it out, and I put in the knife kind of blade. It's not as effective, in my opinion, as the chunky one, but it still does some little touch-up areas nicer than a wire cutter, because you wouldn't be able to get it in there, and the chunky one is too thick as well. I think this thing is more of a cutter. I think you use the length of it more so than the tip, and I'm just using the tip to kind of get some of that out of there. But this is certainly not, this is just representational. I'm not too worried. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is doing the job. So strongly recommend you use get yourself one of those cutters. So you can see in the background my gouge out, and now since he's going to be emerging from that hole, I got a nice pair of tin snips, and I basically just give him a bris. Beep. These models aren't that expensive. If in doubt, give it a try and see if it works. And if not, what are you out? 15, 20 bucks? You can still use it. And remember, if you're having fun, you're always going to be successful in the end. So here he is with his pieces, the base, his bottom pieces, and some of the legs that I had to trim off to give him a bit more of a stalk to go down into my hole. So here comes the trimming of those legs. As I said, you can see there, I think I took 6 off, 3 on each side. I'm just using my my snips, my plastic snips here. And did I take 6 or 4? I think I'm going to take a couple more. You can see I'm just dry fitting it with the hole that I've made. You want to make sure that the hole you've melted in your XPS foam is big enough to support his body. You can go in there deep enough, and here come the other 2. I thought I took 6. So I'm cutting off 6 because they will be obscured by the ice, and what I'm left with is a real silly looking Remorhaz with only the top part of his legs. But the dry fit is a success. I'm liking the way this is going, and I'm going to continue on with this path. Once I straighten them out. Now to prime this, as you followers of Paint to Life, people who watch these painting with commentary knows, I have an airbrush now. The airbrush makes certain things faster and gives you ability to do techniques that you otherwise couldn't do with a brush. You can't spray paint XPS foam. The accelerant in the can will melt the foam, but you can airbrush it. So now, instead of having to use my brush to paint these things and prime them, I can use my airbrush. So that's a benefit of having an airbrush. As you can see, I've primed it white. And now onto the Milliput stuff. Milliput, I've used it many times. You know, you've got this thing bursting out of the ice. It's not going to have a flat surface. You have to have some kind of like lift. So I'm using Milliput, lots of water, to put on these ridges. I'm smoothing them with my fingers, and as I said, lots of water, because we're trying to simulate shards of ice. So you want them to be with right angles, hence this tool. This is just a flat putty cutting tool. I'm pushing down on them to get nice and flat, and I'm using water to work out the fingerprints. But I'm also pushing hard against the edges to give me nice, straight, flat angles and edges. So when all this hardens, it looks like it could be ice. I'm also using the tool to actually draw lines through it. I don't want it to look like a mound of earth. I want it to look like individual plates of ice. So I'm going to go down there and I'm going to draw straight lines from the top out of each and even further down onto the XPS foam, which we'll see in a second. So here I am doing one. I'm cutting at the base here, pushing down the XPS foam. There's like one piece of ice, if you will. You can easily draw on the XPS foam with any type of hard plastic. It will leave an indentation, which is a good guideline, or in this case, a crack in the ice. The parts that I had melted were kind of unstable. This Milliput firmed them right up. You see like the difference between the arms and the frill, but now when that Milliput hardens, they're solid, rock solid. So good idea. But it's important to me that I make sure, like I said, that they are treated like cracks. And this round edge, this lip, I'm coming in here with the tool to flatten out all the ridge. I still want to have an angle, but I don't want it to be rounded. So I'm using a flat, hard tool. And I realized, geez, this is getting nice and flat. However, it's also curved like almost a dome. And that's not right. It should be broken. So eventually I'm going to come in and carve some lines in that to achieve that. Similar to as I'm doing here. And here. And in some places I'm pressing down hard into the XPS foam to bite in even further, knowing that I'll be able to clean it up later. And here are the slits I was telling you about. So 1, 2, 3. Don't want to go overkill, but you want, and then 4. But you want to represent plates of chunks of ice. And then there's this one here on this guy, pushed in down a little more. Guy beside him. And I will score the XPS foam gently with my plastic tool so that this crack, when I'm painting it, will funnel the paint along the crack and, you know, look like the crack furthers out into the ice. One other thing I want to mention, the front of this, as you see, it's been a little bit melted on an angle, and by the front I mean the rightmost side of what we're looking at right here. That's because that's where the heat comes from if it's core. So even though it's not touched by the Remorhaz, I figure the heat would kind of get that to melt. That's why I gently used my foam cutter to melt. Now it's facing up, the top of that insect looking indentation in the foam. It's just an area where the ice has been melting because the creature's been, you know, it's broken free and it's like hissing, looking around, and its heat is causing the ice in front of it to melt. But you know what? I'd be interested to see how you make a take on this should you want to do something similar. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to do, and it might be in this video or in the next, I think it's actually in the next, but the leftover Milliput I have, I'm going to form shards and triangles of broken ice that I'm going to glue in here into the finished product as well. So for the rest of this section of the video, I'm just smoothing out. It's supposed to be ice, I want it to be as smooth as possible, so let's smooth it. So that's what it looked like when it was finished the next day and the Milliput had dried. I was very happy with it. You can see it's got dimension now. It's not just a flat surface. From the side, it's got a lip. It looks like it's broken, cracked skin, hard, cracked rock. It paints beautifully. Milliput's a great model hobby tool. And then from a little bit of a higher angle, you can still see more of the same. So as I was saying, the leftover Milliput that I have, I'm going to make some ice pieces, panels. I just flatten them out and using this ruler to make hard lines. So, you know, like these little shaved chunks, crystalline looking, triangular looking. Using that metal ruler because it makes like, or you could use a knife just to make sharp cuts. And I'm trying to keep them formed. Again, I want them to be triangular, jagged, and whatever. So now it's time to prime the Milliput again, just with some more white. And then we're going to move on with painting this base, which I was very excited to do. A little bit of foreshadowing though. It ends terribly for me. But it works out in the end. But you know, as you paint and you learn, you go back and forth and you realize, yeah, you never know if you try, and then sometimes when you try, you ruin something. This was luckily not ruined, but it's a good lesson we'll share. It's coming up. So let's start to paint this blue. TERRADON turquoise. Anytime you're painting ice, it doesn't matter if you're using an airbrush, which I'm still new with, or when I used to paint these with my regular brushes. Always start with the lightest color. You can always darken something, but you can't lighten it. Turquoise is a great ice color. TERRADON turquoise, one of the contrast paints from Games Workshop. It just got a lovely light look to it. It looks blue, but it also has a bit of green, makes it good for seawater. TALASSAR blue is a great go-to blue from the contrast line. I like using the contrast paints in the airbrush. I don't have to dilute them much, but I do add a couple drops of water to them just for flow enhancement. So you can see I went over TERRADON turquoise, and then I'm hitting it almost everywhere with blue, but it's a little bit misleading. I didn't paint everywhere blue. Just because you see the paint going on doesn't mean I'm applying it full force. I'm trying to make layers built up of bluer sections more so than others, and the sides as well. And the next color, LEVIADON blue. This is the darkest blue. You can see I'm sticking to the outside and just gently touching and then spraying it down into the hole to try and give that illusion of that hole in the ice. So the hole is going to be really dark with LEVIADON blue, and the edges are hit with LEVIADON blue, giving a nice ice look. And then from the sides again, this is supposed to look like a block of ice, and I think it does. Ooh, look, I really hit that, and I said, oh, that'll work. And again, you can always go darker, can't go lighter. So then I had this really cool idea. Well, if this Remorhaz is inside the ice, the side profile, you should be able to see it. I'm always a big guy about thinking about things like that. If it's transparent, I should see him. So I'm using this yellow to kind of blast out a shadow, and the GRYPH-HOUND orange as well. So like if that's clear ice and he's glowing hot yellow, that's kind of what it would look like through the ice, no? If you were in the ice with him, or the ice was clear and you saw his body down below. So I made this effect where I sprayed on these colors to emulate the body, and then here too where his back would be from the top, beautiful. I mean, speak for yourself, I suppose, but I thought that was awesome because you can see in this still shot, it looks like you can see something under the ice, and we know what that's going to be, don't we? Now it's time to work on Remy, our friend. I'm starting with a Calidor Sky base paint, watered down for the airbrush. You can paint this with your brush. I'm going to use airbrushes more and more as I get better. It really helps me churn out faster paint-to-life videos because I can paint a lot quicker. To paint this with the regular brush would have taken me probably 3 times as long. Now I'm still getting used to it, so I'm, clogging my brush quite a bit. But, I was always a fan of putting paint on thinly, so I would do this guy like 3 coats of paint. And to do it nicely without clogging any details, I mean, it takes a while. So the airbrush is going to speed up my process, and therefore I'll be able to have more time to make better videos and longer videos. So now I'm applying some HOETH blue. This is not supposed to be a zenithal prime. I just wanted that first blue to dry and then this lighter blue to take over. But as we'll see as we move through this project, most of this is going to be covered up later anyways. So I really like the idea of the core of this creature to be like lava, like really hot. So here is my array of colors I got ready with. You can pause and look. The purple to the red to the red to the orange to the to the yellows, okay? And that's what I'm going to do here. So starting with NAGGAROTH Knight, since he's blue, and you know, when things are really hot, they get red hot, then they turn orange, then they turn yellow, and then white. So what's earlier than red and something that's blue? I thought, well, that would be purple. So I used the NAGGAROTH Knight around the base of his core body. This is the second time I painted a Remorhaz. I'm going to include some pictures in the final version so you can see. It was over a year ago, so I wasn't as experienced as I am now. And I did him just pure blue and white, and I had the tips of his back kind of orange. But this time I really wanted to make him look, because he had just burst through that ice, I wanted him to look still like he was like nuclear, like he's radiating the heat that just allowed him to break through that ice with ease. So around the edges we're going to have NAGGAROTH Knight, as opposed to say black. If we were doing a red hot molten sword, you might start with black and then the deep red and then the deep orange to deep yellow to white, right? So as you can see, the purple's going on, and I did this. You can see my wet palette there to the right has all the colors already laid out, and I did that because I wasn't planning on letting them dry between coats. In fact, even though this is supposed to be the far edge, I went up a little bit because I knew I wanted to just keep layering more and more and more in wet blend. So next we're on to the KHORNE red. It's a really cool red. It dries very dark. I'm just slapping it right on top of the wet NAGGAROTH Knight and trying not to get so far down that I cover it. You know, the whole point of it being there is not just for underneath the red, but also so that it does show. Okay, so there's the KHORNE red, and then we're up to our first the Evil Sun SCARLET. It's like a nice orangey red on top of the KHORNE. Again, it's still wet, it's blending, wet blending. I really enjoy painting this sort of thing, and you should too. This is just so fun. Just put color on top of color on top of color and see what happens. You know, you don't have to worry about being judged or what other people think. If you paint something like this, even if it looks quarter as good as what I was happy with, you'll be happy with it and your players will love you for it. So now to the first orange, TROLLSLAYER orange. I've used this combination of fiery paints before. I mean, it's pretty much what Games Workshop has in their Citadel line. But for Zariel, my Fire Giant, anytime I've tried to do a lava effect, these were the same colors that I used. On a Fire Dragon Bright, now I'm right up the spine, you see. I'm bringing up some of that troll, whatever the last paint was, and I'm right in the middle here and on top of the spikes, but not going down the side on this, because this side, oh, sound like a wolf. Okay, and then we're hitting some yellow, Flash GITZ yellow, right in the center, up the spine. It's just really fun to watch these colors pool together, and you're pushing and they're swirling around, and when they dry like that, they leave a really cool effect. Look, PHALANX yellow, it's even brighter yet still. And later in the video, I'm going to zap this with a quick shade to blend them a little more. So his eyes, I thought I were going to make them lava. So you can see how it says Waystone green eyes not shown. I was going to make lava eyes, but then I realized in the source art he should have green eyes. So even though I'm doing them with kind of the same build up with the KHORNE red to the Evil Sun Scarlet to the TROLLSLAYER orange to the yellow, I will end up stopping that in about 10 seconds in this video and come back to this later with the emerald green technical gem paint to give them kind of a green brown look to them. Oh, his mouth, I wanted that to be lava-y. I figure if his inner core is that hot, then when he opens his mouth, it's going to be a little Balrog-y where you can see the fire from it. So that's easy. Just stick the wet brush in the mouth and give it a little bit of a paint, and then another one. So this is SHYISH purple. It's a contrast paint, but it's really dark. Holy shit, is it ever dark. So I'd cut it. I used the technical contrast medium, which is like the base of the contrast paints. I mixed it in there with about a 2-to-1 ratio, and I kept adding a little more and a little bit of water to just SHYISH purple. Holy smokes. If you've ever tried it, you can see it on my bowl there. It looks like grape juice. But I wanted to do this fan purple. It's very similar to that first NAGGAROTH Knight that I did on the back. So this just replicates cold part of the snake, or the Remorhaz, as opposed to the hot part. And not cold per se, but it is cooler than that molten looking back. So I made a little too much paint there, but you know, live and learn. Okay, so now here is the shades. So this is the FUEGAN orange shade. So I'm looking at his chest and I'm thinking, okay, well, what color do we do his chest? Some kind of blue. And I'm thinking again, this is his core. The back is so molten looking. Why would the centerpiece be any less molten looking? But I of course didn't want to have a ribbon Remorhaz where he's like orange and yellow on both sides and blue in the middle. So instead I used this FUEGAN orange shade. It's funny, when you spray orange on top of blue, it kind of turns brown. And I'm also hitting his back now, which will blend in some of those oranges and yellows by giving a little zap with the orange shade. But when I put the shade onto the blue Remorhaz, they turn brown, especially on his chest. And that core I put a lot because I wanted it to look like underneath that chitinous armor, that his carapace is heat, even though it's not as bright as it is on the back, it's still there. You can feel the warmth. Now for his sails, that SHYISH purple is going to get a little bit of dry brush treatment, starting with IMRIK blue on the outside, which is the darker of the three that I used. So I want to keep the purple underneath because again, the core is representing the heat, but the blue is, you know, supposed to be a blue creature, so a little bit of IMRIK blue, and then a CHRONUS blue closer to the edge, just to give it a two-tone. Oh, I'm sorry. CHRONUS blue on the inside. So there's two different blues, one on the outside, one on the inside. Now we're back to the outside with STORMFANG dry brush. So STORMFANG, this is closer to the edge where it will still remain blue. The two blues will mix, and closer to the body will be more like the SHYISH purple, but near the edge will be the dry brush blue. Boom! Also make sure you do the sides. And by that I mean like the sail is not that thin, but it's not that thick, but it is still thin. IMRIK blue. Okay, sorry, IMRIK blue we're just hitting his antenna with, and his face, his mandibles, etc. Both sides, not too much though, because I already sprayed it with that orange and he already started as blue, so we don't need to make him super blue. But as I was saying, the fan of the sail is not that thin. It will have some signs showing if you don't touch it up. So NULN oil, just gently, a little dab between each of the segmentations and then let it dry. So I did 3 or maybe 4 and then I stopped. I let it dry and then kept going. If you do too much, because it's so vertical and contorted, it will drip and run, and if it puddles, you'll have this big black chunk, and you don't want that. So a little bit at a time, I also used a black, which I didn't write down here, Corvus black, or Abaddon black for all his little hands, and also the side of his body. There's a crack up the side. There's a black Templar contrast paint in there as well, right before it turns to that NAGGAROTH night purple. I think I missed that in the video as well. And then of course DEEPKIN flesh. It's one of my go-to teeth colors. It's kind of gray, kind of cream. He's got a lot of teeth in there, but they're weird when you paint them all. It makes him look like he's smiling. Hi, I'm here for my dentist appointment. In fact, I need some braces. Can you give me a discount? So you can see his green eyes in this picture and his teeth. He looks a little derpy, as my daughter said, but you know what? It's partially the sculpt, partially how I painted it, and I'm happy with it. So now, let's prepare him to go set in. So a little bit of crazy glue, cram him down in the hole, and he's there. Now, realistic water from Woodland Scenics. I've used this before as water, as some of you are aware. I've also used this before as a glaze and like a varnish. I did it on X-Men Mew, the DEEPKIN, the Star Spawn of Cthulhu, in my episode with that. I'm doing it here as well because this just dries so glossy. It looks like water. And because this is supposed to be ice, this is exactly what I wanted to do. Give the whole thing a nice bath, and when it dries, man, it could be ice. I loved it. Then I ruined it. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then I fixed it. So here he was when he was finished. You can see the water. I applied it so gently, it doesn't cake on there. It's just got a nice shine. You can see the side, the line, so he looks like he's underwater. Oh, this is awesome. Or under ice, I should say. Alright, now it's time to do some little lines. Temple Guard blue, these are little teeny cracks representing where the ice would crack, and I'm just painting them right on. It's kind of a crummy angle because of the reflection. Now here's what happened. After I finished these cracks and it looks like a nice block of ice, I could have called it. Well, I proceeded to put tons of Valhalla Blizzard on there, so much so that it looked white, and I had ruined all this cool ice looking effect that I did. You'll see some of it here in this video. See, my cracks have dried. Too much Valhalla Blizzard plus a little bit of Army Painter powdered snow, bad idea. I ended up taking this thing while it was dry, before it was dry, sorry, and putting it in water. I was literally scrubbing it under a sink. I got most of the Valhalla Blizzard off as it had sort of set, and all the Army Painter scrap off, and he was wet, and I thought I ruined it, but good thing XPS foam handles the water well, and he wasn't underwater long enough for the paint to come off. So that is the one thing I wanted to say about that, and I'll keep this picture up here while I discuss it. But if you make a mistake while you're presenting, and if you make a mistake while you're not anticipating something, well, just try and fix it as best you can. The finished product, which I'm about to show you, I'll go into, but I just wanted to let you guys know that that's my feeling on that. If you make a mistake, just roll with it and be happy. Now, as far as the finished product here, you can see those little teeny pieces of ice I glued in there that look like ice crystals pointing up. They look like sharp shards. That's part of the effect. I did capture that on the video. See his back, it's very fiery and glowy. The side of the base has the shadowing on it to make it look like he continues on below the ice, depending on the angle you look at it from, like that there. The back and the back and the top, very cool. And yeah, loved it. Fun to paint, and yeah, look at that Valhalla Blizzard. It worked out so well even after I scraped some of it off. Now it just looks like the surface of ice that has some loose snow on it. So here was the Remorhaz, the polar worm. I hope you enjoyed this painting with commentary episode. Please like and comment below. Let me know what you thought. If you have any questions, you can email me at paintalife@gmail.com. Otherwise, that's all I have for you guys tonight. I hope you enjoyed this video, despite it being very long. I hope you enjoyed my rambling throughout, because I have lots of things to say that I think are relevant. Let me know if you didn't either, or if you did. Anyways, that's all for now. I'm GMA Tank. Wash your hands, people. We'll see you next time.